The title of today's webinar is The History of ServiceNow Integration. And in today's webinar, you're going to hear from a couple of the best known names in the ServiceNow world, chatting about just that topic. Since the dawn of ServiceNow, users have recognized the need to connect it with other things that are part of the service management process, from databases to other applications and even third parties. These connections make ServiceNow applications more powerful and allow users to perform more impactful work. A variety of integration approaches have been created over the years to enable this connectivity. And in this webinar, we're going to take you through all of them. Over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, you're going to hear the backstory of the integrations. You'll come away with a much better understanding of the best way to connect ServiceNow to everything else in your environment. But before we get into it, just a couple of quick housekeeping things to step through. Firstly, we do welcome questions and comments during the session. So just type your question into the Q&A panel, and we'll get you a response either as part of the presentation today, or we'll get back to you after the session to follow. And the most commonly asked question is whether the session is being recorded. Yes, it is, and we will send you a link to the recording either later on today or tomorrow, so that if you want to go back and revisit something or share it with some of your colleagues, you'll be able to do so. And we'll send that link out, like I said, either later on today or tomorrow morning. But I think now it's probably time to meet the stars of the show. And we'll start off with Mr. David Loo, the Perspectium CEO and my boss. David's the founder and CEO of Perspectium. And prior to that, he was the founding developer of ServiceNow, and also importantly, the guitar player in the official ServiceNow band, Z-Boot. David, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you for that introduction. A little bit of tidbit here is I remember Fred actually hired me at ServiceNow just to make sure that integrations work properly and was built from the ground up as the platform was created. Because I had previously worked with Fred in another company. In that context, I was an engineer facilitating and enabling the integrations for systems that I was involved in, and that's how I started my life at ServiceNow, was to look at almost every problem as an integration problem. I remember discussions with Fred that, what is a platform but an interconnected environment of subsystems that actually, when integrated and put together, provided a way to run workflows and collect data. So that was an oversimplification of what you see today, but that's actually how it started.
That's very cool. And obviously, when Fred asks you to do something, you just don't stop doing it.
No. And then we did it at
still going.
Still going. Haven't left.
Well, that's cool, David. Thank you for that. I'm also pretty excited about our other presenter today, because I've never actually spoken with a real witch doctor. But I'm sure many of you have heard of the ServiceNow witch doctor, also known as Joran Lundqvist. Joran's been working in IT for 20 years. He's also been a customer, a partner, and now an employee of ServiceNow during that time. He's also an author and a prolific YouTuber, and is probably one of ServiceNow's biggest fans. Joran, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Craig. I'm happy to be here and humbled to be here with you and David. And it's kind of funny. David built all this cool stuff and actually stopped working for ServiceNow before I even knew about ServiceNow. So yeah, I bet the history part will be really fun to hear about now. And I also saw you were a ping pong player, so I'll take that as a challenge if we ever meet up. I'll take you on for that one.
I'll make you feel good. I'm not very good.
Oh, you're saying that.
Yeah, I've heard different to that, David. Okay, so before I hand the baton entirely over to Joran and David, let me quickly introduce myself. My name's Craig McDonough. I'll be your host for the webinar today. I look after marketing and strategy for Perspectium and have also been working in the ServiceNow world for quite some time, and I'm also a big ServiceNow fan, alongside many of my Perspectium colleagues. But that's enough about me. Why don't we get on to the topic at hand? And they say that the beginning is always a good place to start. And so, David, this is the ServiceNow office in June of 2005. It's a little bigger now, but what's happening in this particular picture here?
It's our first office. It was actually just an office, right? And slowly we grew into 2 offices and 3 offices, and then we hit the coffee machine at the end of the hallway, and then we couldn't grow anymore. But as a benefit of having an office, we also had the privilege of making coffee for the whole building. So I got really good in operating that coffee machine at the end of the hallway there. But what you see there is how we operated, right? There was no Scrum board, there was no storyboards, there were not many facilities for us to project manage what we were building into the ServiceNow platform. But what we did have was a very tight team, very small group, highly efficient communication between people, and a very useful whiteboard. So that whiteboard was probably erased every week because the items on it were completed at that rate, right? So as Fred thought of features that needed to be implemented in the platform, we would write it down and we would put like our initial right next to it, and then that's how we would do it. There's no date on it, there's no time on it, there's no when is it going to be delivered. It was expected to be delivered as soon as you can finish it. So I took the liberty of translating some of those hard to read points over to the bullet points on the right there. But what I wanted to stress here is by that time already SOAP was enabled. And I think many of you probably recognize the ability for ServiceNow inherently being able to extract data by just tagging on URL parameters like $XML, $CSV, $PDF, $XLS, and so forth. Because that was how we thought about extending the platform, is to make all resources of the platform, data resources, accessible via a URL and converted by specifying the parameter for the format that we would like to see. So that was how the scaffolding was built and added onto over time. And that's why you see a lot of the concepts and ideas on the ServiceNow platform is consistent, right? Consistency is more important to us than how cool it was or how trendy it was. We agreed on how to do one thing, and we made it consistent throughout. And integrations was one of those areas that just had to be consistent in order for people to very quickly understand how things were connected, right? So people started experimenting. Does $CSV work? Oh, no, it doesn't. Then, in the next week, oh, it worked, already. That's because we could see, people starting to use the system that way and go, oh, wow, people wanted to do that. So just tag on. And then later on, when we saw that customers asked us to do PDFs, right, to export PDFs, what is a better way to do that than just to add it on as a $PDF URL parameter to any resource on the system? And voila, it became popular that way. And now it became easy to integrate that into the UI, into the browser HTML to access.
Yeah, and you still use that today, right?
Yeah,
that's
like an instinct. It's an instinct, right? So, as you can see, $SOAP, WSDL for you old timers, $REST, REST v2, right? So that just grew over time and became a consistent idea that people just thought about whenever they want to do something.
Yeah, it's cool of building something like that for like what is now 17 years ago, 15 years ago, and it's still very useful today. I mean, not many functionality are still useful after like 15, 20 years.
Yeah, and I think the power of that is because it's simple, right? It's a simple thing to do.
Yeah.
And because it's simple, it's memorable, and it becomes a go-to, right? Before we move off to this slide, I just want to mention the item in the middle, move to SAC. What does that mean? That means moving our servers from underneath our desk to a data center in Sacramento. So that was one of the tasks that was assigned to me at that time.
Yeah, that's a good choice, I guess.
Yeah,
a little more secure that way, I think, for sure. I tell you what, let's take a look at the timeline of ServiceNow integration from this point forward, and because that's really what we're going to be discussing for the remainder of the session today. This is kind of a rough timeline of ServiceNow integration. As you can see, there's lots of different options here. And what we'll do throughout the course of today's webinar is step through each one of these and talk about them in a little bit more detail, along with some of the other topics that we're going to cover. But before we dive into that, I wanted to take this opportunity to just ask a quick question of you, the audience. We wanted to include a couple of polling questions throughout the course of this webinar, so that you could get involved as well and see who else is out there that is interested in this topic. And so the first question that we had for you that we wanted to get your thoughts on was around how long you've been using ServiceNow. And so I wanted to ask that question, and in just a second up on your screen, you should get a little a poll. And just you can just select one of the options there to let us know, and then I'll share the results with everyone as soon as we've got a good, a reasonable number of people that have voted. All right. Okay. Looks like we've got a pretty good response rate there. Everyone's very fast today. Oh, hang on, there's a few more coming in. I'll let them come in before I close the poll. All right, let's close that poll now, and I'll share those results. This is what people said. It looks like around 8% have been very new ServiceNow customers, been using for less than a year. 15% 1 to 3 years. 27% 3 to 5 years, 33% 5 to 10, and 15% are the real old timers that have been using ServiceNow for more than 10 years.
Wow.
So a good, definitely a good mix. So yeah, so now that we all have a better understanding of how the audience is broken up, what I'd like to do is hand over again to David and Joran to start the history lesson, and let's step through some of these historical sort of moments in ServiceNow integration, starting with soap and jelly.
Right, and actually I touched on this on the previous slide, right? In the very beginning, there was really nothing. There was URLs. There were URLs, and then the ability to export and import things directly on the URL. If your browser session already has a session to the Tomcat service that was authenticated, you can do anything that the UI could do just by basically interacting with URLs. And that was the premise. That was an early premise of integrations is, can you export and import data that way? And then very quickly, right, we just tagged on the ability to follow a standard, which was important to us, right? Because customers came to us explaining what they wanted to do. We had to go back and explain to them do you know the standard? And at that time it was SOAP. For interoperability, we had to pick one, right? But I wanted to touch on Jelly as well, because in the very beginning there were discussions. I think it was only between me and Fred, that maybe the entire ServiceNow environment should be comprised of just a server and web services that were used for integrating other systems, as well as to be used by the browser, right? But little did we know we were actually ahead of the time at that time to be thinking that way, because there's no React, there's no prototype, there's no browser side applications that were conceived at that time. So so he fell back to this Apache project that is little known called Jelly, which basically is a server-side HTML generation, right? The ability to execute XML on the server to create HTML and be served back up to the browser, and that was great. That was great for the time. So that's how that began.
Yeah, and Jelly is still around, sadly, I guess, for most of us people.
Well, it's hidden, and there are preferences that the customers can have today, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, something else that's definitely still around is the mid server and the ECC queue, and they were pretty early too.
Yeah. So these are all extensions of what else we can do now that we have the ability to access URLs and a standard like SOAP. But the customers do not want to do that, either because they're behind a firewall and they can't make up call, or they don't want direct interactivity interaction with a web service. So the mid server actually was conceived after the ECC queue was conceived. That was actually the timing of it. And I would assume up to today nobody knows what ECC stands for.
No, I can't.
But that's good, because I wasn't given an official answer either at that time. And so I would have to make something up if you ask me today. So I think it's like external something channel or whatever. But there was a need to stage process integration and allow consumption of web services not directly, right? So there was a need to make sure that there was continuity of process, whether or not endpoints were made available during an integration process, right? And so the ECC queue was just that, the ability to have just a single point of entry into the ServiceNow environment, where the required data or process transaction was available and waiting for you to get it, right? And that was what the ECC queue was. It's brilliant because it's got an incoming part and an outgoing part, but it's based on a table in ServiceNow, right? Which then means all of the URL access, $XML, $SOAP, PDF is available for that table, right? And that's how the mid server was born, right? Another service that could run outside of ServiceNow that used those URL, specifically the web service one, to interact with the ECC queue and therefore indirect that integration pattern.
Of course, shortly after that, we saw the introduction of plugins.
Yeah. So again, standardization was big at the ServiceNow in the beginning, and I would say it's one of the best decisions that Fred had made, because standardizations allows growth of the platform in a consistent and meaningful way, right? And plugins was just one of those standardizations that allowed personally me, right, to create package integrations It's the precursor to applications that can be delivered on the server and activated and turned on. And then all customers would benefit from it at the same time. And then when there's issues or features to be added, it's added and created for all customers at the same time. So that was how that came about. And so we delivered. I delivered a handful of integrations packaged, right, for telecom systems like Verizon as a plugin that all customers can turn on and just configure.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, I mean, plugins are definitely something that's still being used extensively throughout ServiceNow today.
Yeah, it's more for like internal applications, internal features,
yeah.
right? Because now the store is alive and well and kicking, and that's how you would deliver packaged stuff, bundled applications external to the server.
Yeah, absolutely. Next in the history lesson, though, we have import sets, and this was a pretty big one.
And it was a fun one to build. I built import sets. Fred prototyped it and go, here's how I think customers can get data into the system, because there was an important feature that was requested of us over and over again. How do I get data into ServiceNow, right? And that was great, because if you want to get data into ServiceNow, that means you want to use ServiceNow more, and then over time the platform will grow with you. So that was an important one for us to focus on. And Fred made the first version work, and he passed it on to me. And I took a long time to get this working, because this was a learning process for me in regards to UI. I had to build a very interactive user interface for defining import sets, and especially the transform maps. So I created a very complicated UI page at that time, and it took me a long time. But the concepts are still intact today. I'm happy to report. And that is the result of something that is useful and standard, right? When you do something that people use a lot and it's standardized, it wasn't that stable in the beginning. Now it's very stable. And I think you guys have also went ahead and created robust import sets these days. And I learned from that.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to see you build it like in 2009, and we are still evolving it and building new things. Just like you said, the reverse transfer engine, we're adding so you can run concurrent import sets, and now we're adding data streams to put stuff into that one. So I mean, you can see how efficient it is to use still 12 years later. So yeah, really cool, and a really good job you did there, David.
Yeah, a great idea, goes a long way.
Yeah, we've actually had a couple of questions come in actually as we've been stepping through. So one that I'd like to throw out is is there a way to utilize a mid server for connections into ServiceNow rather than connecting to an endpoint on ServiceNow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but when you want to do that, that tells me that you want to use some feature of the mid server, right? But
right,
you do know that you already have all of the web services that are available to you to interact with the ECC queue, which is what the mid server is doing. It's actually talking to the ECC queue using web service. So if the mid server can read from the ECC queue and write to the ECC queue, so can you directly using REST, right? Or SOAP or whatever, if that's your thing. But if you're saying using the mid server, that means you want to use something that is useful in the mid server, like a probe, a JDBC probe, or whatever probe that's available today, to load data rather than extract data. Yeah, so that's possible through those mechanisms.
That's pretty much how
have
discovery works.
Yeah, that's how discovery works. Right.
Yeah.
But I have to say, right, if you do that, you have a single point of entry and egress, which is the ECCQ table, and that could become unwieldy.
Single point of failure as well, I guess.
Yeah, if that table becomes unavailable, then your port of entry is denied.
Yeah. I also got some clarification. A member of the audience looked up what ECC actually stands for, and according to the ServiceNow documentation, it stands for External Communication Channel. So,
yeah, I created that. I made that up.
Yeah.
I don't think it is. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's keep going with the history lesson and look at another one of your projects, David, ODBC.
Yes, another fun project that I worked on with Mr. Solegi, my developer that I worked on that with. We partner with a very interesting partner that had a library that translated ODBC calls into web service. So that was a fun thing to do. And all we had to do was plug in the web services necessary into the template that the library gave us. And then whenever you connected using ODBC locally, it actually translated that to actually at that time it was SOAP, the SOAP calls that was necessary with the ServiceNow instance. So as a result, there were some limitations, right? If your SOAP web service allowed you access through your credential to access those tables, it would be available through ODBC. And you were also limited to the constraints of the web service, like I think 20,000 records at a time and stuff like that, that you have to now rely on paging to get it working. And then date time was also an issue because if you access web services directly, I don't know about REST these days, you would get date times in GMT, right? Not your local time. And so you got to convert it to display values and stuff like that. So there were some complexities there, but it was a very, it was eye-opening. It was opening doors. It was making people think, wow, what else can I do? I use this ODBC driver in an Excel spreadsheet, and all of a sudden I'm looking at ServiceNow data in an Excel spreadsheet, right? So that was very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned REST. That's actually the next item on the history timeline.
Yeah. So I took a crack at the first version of the REST API, and it was fun, right? Because I created the SOAP API. It was actually quite straightforward. I did, one-for-one kind of thinking and created the REST ability through the same facility, using a handler and using the same Java pattern in the server. But I remember when I first created that, because of how I created it, it was very inefficient. It was causing a lot of resource constraints on the server side, because a lot of the incoming processing was done in script, actually. I think it has been vastly improved since then, and I think they called it a REST v2, maybe even REST v3 these days. But that has taken off its own life. But I was there at the beginning, and I kind of kickstarted that.
Nice. Just after that, of course, was orchestration as well. And orchestration, you're on orchestration, something that's still being used quite extensively inside ServiceNow?
I would say yes and no. I mean, orchestration's newer name in my eyes, or is the integration hub, of course. I mean, orchestration using the old workflow functionality and so on. So I mean, I myself, when I started, we haven't even come when I started looking at ServiceNow, orchestration was the way to go, unless you did the scripting part. And I have actually never built, besides doing some labs to try it out, done anything in orchestration. My life with integration without doing some scripting, we're basically after integration hub come to life. But I mean, this is the place where we actually started to give out like predefined actions that you could actually do without coding and add them into the workflow and just fill in parameters to get stuff work. I mean, I guess kind of the life of workflow, this one, to having that low code ability to actually, you don't really need to know all the hardcore stuff to do things, which I think was an eye opener for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a great pattern to be able to do things data driven, right? And there's a UI that allows you to be data driven, right? Data driven in the old way was create some records in a table and write some scripts that read it and drove some actions from it. But orchestration took it to the next level.
Yeah.
Now the next event on the timeline is one that's well, it's very important to me and David. The birth of Perspectium. That happened in 2013. And then we started to see a few things come out from Perspectium. The first one of those was Data Sync, which was originally called Replicator. But David, what's the backstory on Data Sync?
Well, to be honest, it was an idea that was kicking around. I think it started as an idea. What if we had the ECC queue in the cloud? Right? The ability to move this staging area from within ServiceNow and have it available in the cloud, and in a fashion that it's not only a single channel or a single table that implemented it, but allowed customers to have multiple channels and to define it on the fly, right? To be able to create these channels, and it actually manifested themselves into queues as we went forward and developed this technology. The channels became queues of a message broker service that standardized on messages that came in and out of it, right? And then what problems do we solve with that? Right? And the biggest problem we solve with that is big volumes of data transformed into messages that came in to ServiceNow and moved out from ServiceNow without having any constraints on performance, as well as security and privacy. So that was the goal, and that was the birth of Data Sync that then became one of our biggest use case for our customers. A simple idea.
Definitely. Yeah, and then shortly after that came the other sort of big use case for our customers, which is around Service Gateway.
Mm-hmm. So as we moved large amounts of data through this, I guess, queue in the cloud, customers approached us and go, I don't want to move large amounts of data. I want to move a little bit of data, but frequently. Then, ask them why. He goes, well, we have these systems outside that needed to communicate with ServiceNow, but some of them are on-prem, some of them are systems that, if I had to build it, it would take a long time and a large team. Do you have something that can plug into this, right? And that's when the Service Gateway was born out of the same infrastructure of queues in the cloud, and the ability to consume and produce into these queues. Then we were able to build standard components that were delivered into this Service Gateway that allowed, I guess, connection limited interaction between systems. Connection limited because both environments participating in this workflow do not need to be up at the same time all the time because of this staging area in the middle. called the queuing environment, the message broker service that allowed processes to be staged and parked until it's able to consume. So Service Gateway was popular because of our ability to standardize on deploying consumers on it that fulfilled a particular process and a particular target system that is ServiceNow or is something else besides ServiceNow.
Right. Right. Well, and it was a little while after that that ServiceNow themselves built out, for some use cases, they built out Integration Hub to be part of the story. And I actually just want to point out that this timeline, I love this timeline because it shows sort of how ServiceNow and Perspectium have worked together to deliver integrations over the years. But Integration Hub, you're probably the best person to talk about that. Can you say a little about sort of how that came about and the impact it had?
I mean, to be honest, I haven't worked that closely to it as David has said. I built Integration Hub or something like that. But I mean, Integration Hub started out when we got the flow designer coming up, and so in Kingston. I mean, that's really, like we say, orchestration took it to the next level with workflows. Then Integration Hub took even the next level, where you could so much easier build stuff, and even took a bigger step of going away from actually needing to know scripting. With Integration Hub, we also give external people and partners to create spokes where they can actually put in predefined connections to whatever software we have. And I think I'm not lying, but I think we have over 100 different applications that we have built spokes for that people can reuse. And that's the best part. We can do it at a high speed, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel again. I mean, it's simple. Let us focus on this stuff so that you can, as a customer, can actually focus on your business processes and get them up and running. So yeah, I love Integration Hub.
That's the same great idea. Standardizing and being data driven, and being able to activate citizen developers to do their own thing, where the hub is solving the connectivity problem for you, right? Perspectium also have a spoke in the Integration Hub for the same purpose of reusability, right? But a plug for us is, we have some customers who don't want to get down to that detail and build their own integration. That's when we come in and provide package integration processes on top of all of the technology that's needed to deliver this solution for our customer. We package it up in a repeatable format. So package it up means everything that's needed in the connectivity, everything that's needed in security, everything is needed in performance and throughput, right? We bundle all that up in best practice, and then we deliver that over and over again in a repeatable fashion in a product, right? So we stand on the shoulders of giants.
We do indeed. And in fact, one of the examples of that is our Service Bond products that are essentially just those packaged integrations that David spoke about. And then also, David just mentioned the Integration Hub spoke, which we just announced. It just got certified in the store, I think it was 2 weeks ago, and so that's now available to all of our customers, and in fact to ServiceNow customers to access in the store.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Sorry, David. Go on.
Yeah. To iterate, right? The difference between something like Service Bond and Integration Hub is just the next step, and who's responsible in keeping it running and making sure that it runs 24/7, right? It's Perspectium's in Service Bond. It's Perspectium's responsibility because it's a subscription. after we've deployed that package best practice onto your environment, we are now part of your support team. And that is the value proposition there. And there are plenty of customers who go back and forth, right? They have some integrations in the integration hub, and they've identified some patterns that actually match with us. And then that's when they talk to us about, do you have a package integration other than us doing this everything in web services or whatever low-level technology that they have. It's time for them to rely on a vendor to deliver the bundled value.
Yeah. No, that's very true. Can I hand over to both of you actually to sort of walk through? So I think we've covered a lot of the history and the background of integration. Can I ask both of you to comment on sort of today's integration landscape? Joran, do you want to kick us off?
Well, the main thing I would like to take from it, I mean, we have all the things that David talked about, and still tools in the toolbox we're using, and like we mentioned today about the spokes and the store and so on. But one thing that I would really want to lift forward as a ServiceNow person is the remote tables, where is a real, I don't think it's been around for like more than one or might be two releases, but where you can actually, if you just want data temporary, you can actually use remote tables to fetch the data and store it in the memory of the instance and just work with it like a normal table, but it's not saved in the database, which might be quicker, and you can have some real-time data up and running. And we have some good example with, I think it's SAP and stuff like that, where you're in the CSS, want to get some data about the customers you're looking at, you can just put them in the remote table and look at that through there. A lot of the other stuff we have been talking about, so I don't know if there's anything special you want to talk about in this one, David?
No, I'm actually interested in remote tables. The remote table that I'm familiar with was actually way back when it was called Glide Record Remote or Remote Glide Record. Is it the same concept? Is it the ability to use remote glide record in a separate Java process as if you're using glide record locally inside of the platform?
I've never heard what you talked about, so I'm kind of hard, but the concept is basically you're pulling the data and you're having the tables just stored in the memory. And I'm not an expert on this one, so I might be someone slapping my head when I get back to ServiceNow, but since it's in the memory, you can't have a gigantic amount of data, but it's in there, and you can do normal direct calls on it. You can make database views on those tables and so on, and you can have them cached if you want or need to. But for those cases, and I think the limit is around like 100 rows per remote table, is where you just need to fetch some data, want to present them like normal data, like on a form or something like that, but you don't want to store them. You don't need to store them in your database. It's a little bit quicker as well.
So this is outside of the ServiceNow environment. You're not using remote tables in a script in ServiceNow, but you're rather using it as a Java library?
You're pulling the data into the ServiceNow, but you're not saving the data in the database. It's being just saved in the I don't know if it's in the Apache memory or whatever memory it is, but it's still in the instance, but not saved in the database. So if you do a SQL query, you can't find it because it's not in the database itself.
Got it. Well, interesting idea. Yeah, I can see that helps cache some data before using it, right? And you can build forms on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we show here on this slide are types and tools and ways going around. I don't think, and everyone on this call should be familiar with at least the tools that are available for the ServiceNow platform already. But it's important to call out the different integration types, right? And be able to talk about what is the best way to do something given the type of integration that you're trying to solve, right? Fundamentally, right, task automation and process automation has to do with transactional data, right? That is that you want to share with something external that starts its life either inside of ServiceNow, right, a requester, and then being fulfilled outside of ServiceNow because there's a separate service, card reader, Active Directory or whatever that needs to take the next step on that task. And that's what that integration type means, right? It's a transactional one. Data automation is related to the ability to access data, like, similar to what Goran just said about remote tables, right? The ability to get what you want at the time that you want it as a copy without interfering with other people or other process or other systems, right? Being able to tap in, right, in a very efficient way. So that's what we call data automation as well. And a lot of times it just ends up as being, is there a way to copy data the way that it's represented in a system to another system that can be used more efficiently or exposes it to other data sources, right? And so data warehouses come into mind for data automation, right? The ability to build a data warehouse and have multiple systems contribute to it so that now you can build meaningful business intelligence from it, joining data from IT with sales, with HR. And now, if you have all of those applications inside of ServiceNow, your job is done, right? You just use ServiceNow. But what we've encountered in our customer base is that a lot of these customers already have incumbent systems for sales that they have, or HR that they have been using for a long time. And it's just meaningful for them to put IT data together with HR data externally in order for them to get some analytics or intelligence from joining those data sets. So that's where data automation comes in. And for data automation, the focus is always around data engineering, right? There's so many ways to get data these days that if your data engineering team or your data architect team is busy solving the HTTPS SSL problem, or is it encrypted at rest, and who has access to this and that, then that takes time away from them from understanding what data is needed and how it's delivered, and more importantly, is it secure, right? I'm getting this data set. So that's where I think the industry is focused on data engineering and data architecting these days as a separate topic than data integration, right? Which is a separate concern. And
yeah,
I think it's important to understand all the capabilities of the platform in order for you to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And also, to go back to what you said earlier, to understand the reason why you're doing this integration in the first place. Like what's the, like, because the answer to that question will help determine this. And in fact, that's a great segue into our next polling question, which is around exactly that. What problems are you trying to solve with integration? So I'm just going to launch that poll here, and if you could jump in and select, you can select as many of these as you want. You don't just have to select one. But what are the problems that you're actually trying to address through integration? Is it moving data to a data warehouse, flowing process across other service management applications, which could be other ITSM applications, or maybe development tools, customer support tools, those kind of things, connecting with chat and video conferencing, triggering automation tools, or e-bonding with customers and suppliers?
It's a very integrated world these days.
It is.
The very successful integration happens without you knowing it, right? When you park your Tesla in your garage, it talks to your internet and downloads the software. That's great. You get in the next day, it's already done. That's great integration. When you have to go and figure out why did my HTTPS fail? And is it missing this required field and that? That's when things start to not work well, because you're stuck trying to fix a problem that is not part of the solution that you want to get in the first place, right? So keep that in mind.
Yeah,
definitely.
And just to add to that one, we're really back to where we're talking about a lot when we talked with ServiceNow, is get the workplace to work as your home environment or all other apps. You want to have the same simplicity. It should just work. You shouldn't need to worry about something else.
Data driven, going with standards, plugins, plug and play, right? Being able to be consistent on how you do things is very important.
Yeah, definitely. Well, these are the results that we just got back. Thank you for your answers. I won't read them out, but you can see the results that we got there. Nothing too surprising. I think the majority wanting to move process across other service management applications.
Well, I'm surprised by that. What other service management application is there besides ServiceNow? Come on, guys.
Exactly. I thought the chat and video conference tool should be up when you look at the world today.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the sort of another big question that people ask is, how do I choose the right approach when I'm trying to choose integration? And I realize that we're coming close to the end of time, so we'll step through this fairly quickly. But I think there are a couple of different ways that you can approach the problem. And so I'll hand over to the two of you to just sort of comment on this.
I mean, I totally agree. I mean, you have these three options, and I mean, it's all dependent in my eyes on the requirements you have. I mean, and how complex is there? I mean, I would say if there already exists something, use that. Don't do it yourself. It's just stupid. You need to support it as well. Then, if you get it from someone else, they own it as well. And of course, like the top right in my screen, at least, I mean, the package one, if that fits you, then in my, of course, you should take the whole bundle, because then you don't need to worry about anything.
Yeah, but there are situations where do it yourself makes sense, because it's just something that you can do quickly, and it's risk adverse, right? It's not a risky thing, right? A lot of the one-way integrations for messaging and notification, right? Those things can be done quickly and in a do-it-yourself, data-driven way using Integration Hub and Spoke. Because it's ready, it's packaged in a way that can be consumed that way, right? But when you start to get to a more complicated environment to environment integration with multiple entry points and mapping constraints and triggering requirements, then that's where the consultants come in and go, we can do this for you for 350 hours, right, or 200 hours of time, right? But at that time, you have a choice to go into the store to look for a package integration for the system that you're looking for, or get an iPaaS and try to build something consistent and standard and own it, right? Or go for a package integration process type of an approach where there's a vendor that can do this for you, right? Either in the store or outside of the store. Yeah. So I think that it's important to realize that this distinction exists, and it's not one for all.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And in fact, that leads nicely into our last poll of the day, which is really around what integration approach you're using with ServiceNow today. And this is another one of those multi-select ones, so you can select more than one. But yeah, what are some of the approaches that you're using in your organization today to integrate with ServiceNow? I'll just give that a minute or two for people to. Wow, people are voting very quickly today. That's obviously
It's because it's coming out of the
coffee.
hour.
Yeah.
Hey, why is Perspectium Technologies there? Who put it there?
All right. Let's just in the interest of time, we've got a good percentage of the audience has voted. So I'm going to close that poll and share the results with you just so you can see
Wow.
how people responded to that one. A lot of web services.
I'm surprised we
a
got
lot
a
of
lot of
integration
customers
hubs.
on this call. That's great.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, some different. It's interesting to see sort of the mix of integration approaches that people are using.
Yeah, web services is going to be around. It's going to be around forever.
Oh, yeah.
That's because it's a fundamental thing, right, to happen. But what I see in the trend is it's moving more and more towards a tool for vendors, for applications vendors to actually use, and less as a thing that an administrator would be doing, right, or a citizen developer would be doing. Citizen developers are moving more towards drag and drop integration hub, data-driven kind of an approaches, without even knowing how it's communicating with the external system, right? So the engineers working on your Tesla would be the ones involved in using those web services, but the system integrator would probably be using modules that have web services underlying it, and then the car maker would just then install those modules.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. Well, David and Joran, I think we've come to the end of our time. In fact, we've slightly gone over the end of our time. So I wanted to just quickly sort of wrap everything up here by talking quickly about, or just putting in a quick plug for Joran's book. This is the book that one of the things that made sort of the witch doctor who the witch doctor is. You can access this book. You can download it from. You can buy it from Amazon. There's a link at the bottom of the page there as well. But Joran, anything you wanted to say to promote the book a little?
I'm so bad at this kind of stuff. Right?
How do we get a signed copy?
Exactly. I'll send you one day. What I'm thinking about is, in my case, I did this because I was thinking about myself, what I would have hoped to learn and knew when I started ServiceNow. So this one I wrote actually 2 years ago, and that's pretty much trying to put down all the knowledge I had at that time, and just let everyone, hey, don't do the mistakes I do. So that's pretty much what's happening. I'm still using it myself because it's a good go-to. How did I do that? And I have to look it up in the book.
It's great that you took that initiative and you created something useful for everyone. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, David.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we also have a couple of quick promos for Perspectium. We've got our next webinar coming up on April the 7th. It's called Banking on Operational Resilience. And this will be another fireside chat, so similar to what we did today. But this time it's with the Director of Service Management Products and the Principal Architect for ServiceNow Application Development at the Bank of New York Mellon. And they'll be talking about how they secure valuable service history for governance and compliance, how they enable reporting, how they mitigate the risk of change from migrations and upgrades, and how they make sure that IT stays aware of and aligned with critical business functions. So that's shaping up to be a great webinar. It's happening on April the 7th, and you can just register on the Perspectium webpage. And also, if you wanted to try the DataSync product for yourself, DataSync is the data replication product the data replication product that we spoke about. You can try that out for yourself. There's a self-guided live demo at that URL, datasyncdemo.perspectium.net. it's a way for you to get your hands on the product in a live ServiceNow instance, and you can use that to see exactly how perhaps it may work in your environment.
It's complete and real time. It populates an external cloud MySQL that you can see the results immediately.
Yeah, yep, definitely. But yeah, with that, thank you for joining us today. I trust you found the webinar informative. I hope you were able to get some new ideas about how to connect ServiceNow with other things that are part of your service management process, from databases to other apps to third parties. These are the connections that make ServiceNow applications even more powerful and allow your users to perform more impactful work. So Goran, thank you for your time. It was fantastic to have you on the call.
Thank you, guys. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Goran.
And David, thank you to you as well.
My pleasure.
Excellent. Well, as I mentioned at the start of the session, this webinar has been recorded, and we'll send a copy of it out to you in the next day or so. We'll also include a link to Joran's book and some other Perspectium resources that you'll probably find useful. In the meantime, if you want to read any additional customer stories or learn more about Perspectium, please visit our website at perspectium.com. We look forward to working with you. Thanks again for joining us today. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.